Welcome to Kubernetes SIG Cloud Provider. It is January 28th, 2026. We are governed by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct. So treat one another as you would like to be treated. Please raise hands if you would like to, or add things to the agenda if you would like to bring any topics up. And we will take a look, jumping into our first topic, which is Julian has a KEP he would like to discuss. Julian, you have the floor.
Thanks. Just a quick introduction of myself. I think I haven't been in this call since 2024. I'm Julian. I work at the open source integrations team at Hetzner, and particularly working on the Cloud Controller Manager for Hetzner Cloud. The KEP watch-based route controller reconciliation using informers. A quick summary right now, the routes controller is trying to reconcile the routes at a fixed interval of 10 seconds. And that's causing quite a lot of API requests for us. So we are trying to move this to be event-based like nearly all other controllers in the Kubernetes ecosystem. And that landed in 1.35 in alpha with a disabled by default feature flag. And we deployed it or enabled it by default in the latest version of our Cloud Controller Manager because we are very impatient to see it work. And we did a quick look at the request rates, and it seems like for us, users that have the new version deployed are making on average 40% fewer requests per minute to our API. So that's, from our point of view, a great success. That's why we don't want to abort this KEP. And for 136, we ideally would like to promote it to beta. There was a pending discussion during the alpha or the last release cycle around adding a metric for other cloud providers to verify if this is working as intended. And Lucas opened a pull request to define that metric in the KEP and graduated through the beta stage, and then another pull request in the Kubernetes repository to add the metrics. So the question to you would be if it's already too late in the release cycle because the PRR deadline is next week and the enhancement deadline is the week after that.
So I want to, and we can go into detail about these specific topics, but I want to kind of set a baseline expectation because I'm not sure if you're familiar with the way beta is in Kubernetes now. It's basically the new GA. Like once stuff is in beta, people don't want to make significant changes to it, which means that the production readiness review for going from alpha to beta is more significant than it used to be, which brings us right back to things like the PRR checklist will have things like, let's see what happens with this metric, which is why you're going to put these metrics in. But I understand that you are eager, and that is awesome. But we have to be realistic about it's not just one provider either who should be, looking at metrics. So it would be ideally, our partners at Red Hat and others would also kind of take a look at it while it's in alpha before we go to beta, just in case we have to change or re-implement the alpha. Because there have been significant, Kubernetes features like, say, dual stack support that alpha went in and wasn't quite right and had to get re-implemented as alpha before it went to beta, which made things take longer, but it was the right move. So we are with you. We will work with you on this. If it doesn't all happen in the next week and a half, it will happen in the next few months. Just setting the expectation, we don't want to rush it. We want to get it right. But these metrics that you're looking at are a part of getting it right. I'll pause there.
I don't think there is a hurry from our side. We have already enabled it. So this is just about making sure that the process is correctly followed for everyone else.
Yeah, I think Elmico probably has more insights to give there as well. Yeah.
I don't know about insights, but like my thoughts at least. I so yes, we're approaching the freeze, right? But this isn't like we're not, and this isn't a new enhancement. And I think that there is a process for graduating from alpha to beta. So yeah, like we're not introducing a new enhancement here. We're just, graduating. So I think, yeah, I'd like to go check out these, check out these PRs. I appreciate that Lucas has added them. And yeah, we just need to go through the PRR now and make sure that everything fits in line. And if it doesn't, then, we'll just work towards the next cycle. But you know, Julian, I'm kind of like, I'm excited to see this transit through and make it to fully graduated. Let's just focus on the details now and getting everything right, I think.
In case the beta promotion is off the table because of time issues, we can still add the metric in this release and make some progress on that and give people who want to test it metric to see if it works for them, even without putting the beta label on it.
For the metric, that's a really good idea. And that's kind of what I was getting at is some of the PRR steps, if you go and you kind of read them, you'll see some of the steps have to do with, and what do the metrics do in these cases, in these cases? So like having those metrics will let you answer those questions. I'm not sure if you can answer those questions accurately if the metrics aren't in yet. That's kind of the chicken and egg situation we're in. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like, unfortunately, like I'm just seeing these now. I missed them in my email, but like, yeah, like, I think at this point, let's just keep the reviews up. Let's try and test it as much as possible, make sure everything works. And, if we miss the deadline, we miss the deadline, but at least we're working towards it and we're you know, trying to satisfy the PRR and everything. I think that's the best thing we can do at this point.
And if we're close, like if we actually make, say Almico makes it through all these and says, oh, we're good. We can always file an extension if we need to, but I just want to make sure that if we're putting code changes in to get more data, that we then have the benefit of that data to correctly fill out the PRR so that we don't try to fill out the PRR and we're missing all the data that we needed because the data became available just now. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it does. And I think the other part too is this is a relatively low risk feature because it's actually improving behavior and it's still behind a feature gate and everything. So I think it's lower risk.
Thank you very much for the input.
Okay, awesome. Anything more if we have Joel or any others on the call who want to weigh in on this cut before we move on to annual report? Okay, fantastic. Next up, Elmico is getting the annual report started. You want to tell us about that and tell us where people can give input?
Yes. Yeah, trying to get on top of the annual report early this year. The Mache just sent out the announcements about this, so we've got a template up. In years past, they make a template and then we kind of go in and fill it out with things that we've done. And there's space for any of the sub projects to go there and add things. And there are some general questions that I think I brought forward here to kind of show the community. So a couple questions for all of us to consider are, what work did the SIG do this year that we would like to highlight in our report? And are there any areas or sub-projects that we could use help with? So I think, you know, feel free, like anyone who's on this meeting or watching the recording, this agenda doc is open. I would say feel free to come and make suggestions here if there's something that you want to see in that report. You can put information there. You can also reach out to any of the SIG, any of the SIG chairs or tech leads in our SIG Cloud Provider Slack channel. Probably I think at some point we'll get a PR going to answer, to update the template with the answers. And ideally we'll focus all the activity there then. So like once we get that PR created, maybe I can take an action item to get that up in the next week. And then we can start to kind of collaboratively work on it asynchronously. So people could go to the issue and say, hey, please include this cool work that we did for our sub project or something. Because at this point we have about a month to complete this, and this is our opportunity as a SIG to really shout from the rooftops and tell everybody what we've been doing and what we think is really cool about what we've been doing. So I just want to encourage and invite everyone to kind of keep your eyes and ears open, and if you have something you think should be in there, please speak up. Put it in this document, put it in the issue that comes up, whatever, however it gets to us, shout about it and we'll put it in there. I don't know, Bridget. Hopefully
Awesome.
that
That's
helps.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I appreciate, looks like Julian is already putting a link to that cup. And yeah, we'll put some probably stuff about Crow, and other things that have happened in the last year. So basically the scope is calendar year 2025.
Yeah.
Um,
Like I think and this kind of dovetails into my next topic, I guess. I think another cool thing to talk about, even though it's not a big cap or it's not a sub project edition or whatever, we talked a lot last year about improving the state of our cloud provider repos and making them more accessible. So that we can get changes through that need to come if they need to come in an emergency fashion. And I think looking back in a retrospective, that's something very cool that we did that maybe is not very visible, is that the SIG was able to get the owners files cleaned up in some of our repos, get the SIG maintainers or the SIG chairs and tech leads added to those things. um, and from my perspective, it's made a really big difference, partially because now I'm on all these I'm getting emails from all these like GitHub repos, which is like, okay, it's increasing what I have to read. But I'm also seeing all the great things that are happening. And so, this is kind of my next point. I wanted to really take a moment and just give thanks to all the maintainers out there across all the different projects we have. We've talked a lot in the past about improving the state of these repos that the SIGs own, improving testing, doing all these things, and seeing a lot of the activity that's happened over the last 6 months. I just wanted to take a moment and kind of give thanks because there's been a lot of great improvements. I see a lot of movement in the repos. And especially I want to call out the GCP maintainers too, because we had talked about some difficulties there that people were having in consuming the repo for doing development work. And in the last month, even since our last meeting, they've made some really great strides to change that and make some progress there. So yeah, kudos to everyone out there. Really excited to see what's going to happen in 2026. And I think, things are just getting better and better, for us in the SIG.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Almika. Okay, and it looks like we have another topic. Nolan, you'd like to talk about the AWS CCM and dual stack.
Yeah. So, for those who are not aware, right now the AWS CCM does not support configuring load balancers for both IPv6 and IPv4. That's something that is implemented in an external project called the Amazon or AWS Load Balancer Controller. That controller basically uses a field on services called uh, the load balancer class field. Is this better? Okay, I'll just stick
Yeah, a
really
little
close to my
better.
mic. um, the load balancer class field basically says, hey, the CCM should not be responsible for provisioning the service. It should be something else. And they've opted to use annotations to configure load balancers that way. So when you create a service with the AWS load balancer controller, it needs to have the load balancer class field set correctly, and then you would pass in annotations on the service configuring the load balancer with AWS specific options. However, uh, Azure at least seems to have implemented a standard API that Kubernetes introduced that uses proper spec fields or full-fledged spec fields on the service to say what IP families am I supporting and how should I treat them? Should I prefer to have one single stack with IPv4, Or if I have dual stack, which should I prefer? Or do I require my load balancer to have dual stack for all instances? I guess my question is, have other cloud providers besides Azure implemented this? It looks like AWS has not, because they're using their own controller. Um, but it seems to me the AWS one should probably use the service API to implement this rather than annotations for doing this in tree.
Quick clarification question. Is this
Yeah.
specifically about the traffic between the load balancer and the pods, or what the service exposes as its status between pod and load balancer?
That's a great question. Let me look. I don't think the service API currently allows specifying what the backend is, because that is different between different cloud providers. Like AWS has something called target groups. I think it could also be security groups. GCP has like network endpoint groups and instance groups and things like that can be backends. So, to my knowledge, the service API does not expose backend configuration, and it's up to the uh, implementing controller to figure out how to do that, like what conventions they might set or what defaults they do.
Yeah, like I mean, in AWS, you can have a load balancer as dual stack, but the entire traffic to the backend can be just IPv4 or IPv6. So the backend traffic can't be a dual. I mean, it doesn't support dual stack. I don't NLB or LB. They don't support, and it's list NLB. I'm pretty sure they don't support dual stack backend. Meaning like the LB can be dual stack, which means you can both IPv4 and v6 traffic can hit the LB. But to the backend, it has to be registered as either IPv4 or IPv6 only. It doesn't support. So on that front, also I know. I mean, I didn't look how the current implementation is it because I saw there's one PR which is out. I think it is from Red Hat. I'm not sure. I have it in my queue to review it this week. So not sure if that would help your use case because that it is adding basically the PR is about adding dual stack support for in CCM.
Yeah, that's actually my PR.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So
I
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
have it taken, but yeah.
So I guess I should clarify. My PR, I initially started implementing it with annotations to mirror what the ALBC does. But looking more at this service API, it seems to me like the CCM should not use the same annotations that ALBC does. Um, Even though using the load balancer class field would basically say which controller should reconcile these, I think it makes sense for the CCM to support the service API rather. And if there's a need, maybe exposing uh, an annotation for what the backend traffic would be.
Yeah, I think that we definitely need. I think at least in AWS, you definitely need the backend traffic should be because otherwise it would be a guess. I think I'm not that part. So I okay to your first question, right? I agree that I mean we what the way implementation in CCM need not be similar to what is there in ALB, AWS load balancer control because that is purely AWS and EKS specific implementation and based on what they think is. I mean, I'm part of EKS, but like, yeah, what the product thinks on their side are based on EKS customer requirements. It that pipeline is different. So definitely the implementation in CCM can be different and we can if we are having the service class, a separate property in Kubernetes object itself, I think definitely we can use that as a trigger, that as a main thing instead of using annotations, because um, the CCM, even the CCM's original implementation, mostly based on annotations, is because a lot of things were not part of the initial implement, were not present at the initial implementation time. And I think it's basically like, okay, do you want, what is there a right way to migrate or not? That's the reason like why those things were in the way they were currently. So uh, yeah, we can definitely use the upstream way, like what is being provided in the native Kubernetes object instead of using annotation. At least that's what I think. Like.
Okay. So I think what I'll do is update my PR to remove right now the PR supports setting things like the supported IP families, whether it's IPv4 or both IPv4 and IPv6. I think I will make that so that kind of information is only on the service rather than an annotation or on the service spec. But then things like the backend information, which I don't believe is exposed through the service API, that's something I can put on annotations. So yeah, I'll clean up my PR so that it's not referencing both annotations and the service spec.
Got it. Yeah.
All right. Looks like Almiko has something to add here.
Yeah, mostly a question. I guess like I totally get, what you're talking about here, Nolan. Did we ever discuss the idea of distilling like a common library between the ALBC and the cloud provider AWS? Is that something that we would consider, and then both of the tools could use the same common implementation?
I
Or
have not
just,
spoken to anyone about that. Um, in
like,
I
would it
think
help, I guess?
would it help?
Like if we made the module
Maybe.
exposed from the ALBC and the cloud and the CCM could import it. Like, does that even make sense or anything?
I mean, that would give us a layer over the calls to the AWS SDK directly. I think from my perspective, I'd like to see this dual stack support or these changes limited specifically to dual stack support and not expose everything that the ALBC can do.
Yeah, totally.
Even if we had commonality and we only used a small portion of the ALBC code, maybe that would be fine. But I don't know that it gains us a whole lot
Okay.
to import ALBC code or to factor out a shared library.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay. Do we have anything more about these AWS CCM full stack topics or anything related? Thank you for bringing this topic up, Nolan. And Kirsten, thank you for weighing in. Okay. Shall we pop over to look at needs triage issues?
I
Oh, wait.
might have
Julian has a topic. Yes.
Sorry, yeah. From the previous discussion, I have a similar question. We have right now around 15 plus annotations on services that we then pass on through the load balancer. And it feels like pretty bad UX to have these arbitrary key value config options that the user has to learn. And then the ingress, the API gateway controller has some limit of 10 annotations that they pass through. So our users are being arbitrarily limited in the way that they can configure the load balancer on our side. So my question is, how are you people all dealing with that limitation there? Do you have some config maps or CRDs to configure the load balancers in their entirety, or are you using annotations too for this.
Do you want to take that one, Almiko?
I think like Nolan should take this. He's probably been looking at it closely. I didn't even realize those limits existed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right,
Nolan,
go for it.
I will say I didn't realize those limits existed either. I do know within Red Hat, our Ingress team has been looking at this as well. Like this is a common thing that we want to bring dual stack support into our products. So that's something I'll bring up with them and possibly bring back to this call. Julian, when you say there's 15 annotations, is that 15 annotations for Kubernetes cloud provider support, or is that just for AWS or just for a given provider?
No, I'm trying to say this comment about like there's a limitation of 10 annotations on the object, right? Like on which object is that? Like
Do we want to change it so that that's configurable? Like, is changing the number of annotations desirable, or should we be going a different direction entirely?
The number of annotations, the limit is somewhere in the API gateway CRDs. They arbitrarily set a limit and said, bring very good use cases to us. So we raised that limit. So that's not something in the cloud provider sphere of influence directly. And our annotations are mostly for configuring the Hetzner load balancers that we create. So setting up health checks and different options. I don't know, for all the ports that are being opened and how the load balancer is being exposed to the public. All the API fields that you can set, we try to make available to the users. And we read them from the service object right now.
so this is specifically kind of an issue with like the CCM interacting with the gateway API as well. The gateway API is what's scoping down the annotations. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, that's one of the UX issues. The other one is that annotations are just a bad UX
Right,
to
yeah.
configure
I
something.
know Joel's ears are on fire right now as we're talking about annotations.
I'm reading the gateway spec, and I see that it has two fields, labels and annotations, that are supposed to be replicated down into the service, and it looks like they're actually both limited to 8 according to this documentation. I'll paste this into the notes.
Well, our friends over in SIG Network and Gateway API are not that far away from us. I mean, I have a member of my own team here at Microsoft who works on Gateway API, so we can certainly discuss this with them and find out why. What I'm trying to understand from Julian, from your point is this a limitation that you feel like is arbitrary and should be more configurable and change? Or is this just a symptom of a wider problem? Like, in terms of your perspective, what would be a good fix?
I think the better option would be to not use annotations to make like 15 config options available to the user. I just don't know should we add a CRD for that? Users then have to install that. We have to update that. It feels like the K Cloud Provider library isn't really built to support additional CRDs for reading configuration. So then we go the route of the AWS load balancer controller and just have a separate tool with a CRD to configure the load balancer. But that's also a lot of work. So right now we are just using the annotations.
I think, in some ways, this reminds me a lot of a similar discussion that's happening in kind of the scheduling areas right now. When there's been for a year or more, I think the DRA folks have been driving an effort to try and And not just DRA folks, but I think the AI conformance group is also into this as well. But like trying to get an understanding of how we could talk about like rack locality and data center locality for like where units are. So like, is there a way that we could have like a label or a field so that someone could look at a node or whatever and know that, two nodes are in the same rack or whatever, right? And this is important for scheduling, certain types of workloads. And I feel like this is a similar type of problem where we have a disparate cloud providers that each have different options that they expose for their networking and load balancing services. And we're trying to come up with a way to talk about an API that could be useful on all these different platforms. And it's kind of like similar to the topology issue because the way Google Cloud talks about rack topology is different than the way AWS talks about, rack topology. And so how do we have a single API that could address both these things? I don't necessarily have any answers, but this is one of those big kind of existential API questions. How do we create an API that could satisfy all these things? And unfortunately, given the diverse nature of the individual APIs right now, like annotations is our best step forward. Joe, is Joel still on the call? Joel, like, do you know other API solutions to like how people get around? Like, how do we break free of the annotations with this kind of unstructured data?
Um, yeah, there isn't really a great solution apart from doing kind of what Cappy has, where you have like proper types. Um, aren't we doing that kind of thing with Crow?
Yeah, maybe that's an interesting approach to this, right?
But yeah, there's not really a good solution if you want to stick to services at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Nolan.
One thing I'll have to investigate is there is this load balancer class reference. I'll admit I haven't followed that API down to see does this load, maybe Kirthon knows, but is this load balancer class somewhere we can define some of these things, or is it not uh, that robust?
The load balancer class is basically just a tag arbitrarily where once you set it, the CCM doesn't take a look at the load balancer. And then any load balancer controller that you have configured in your cluster can take a look at it. So there isn't really a load balancer class object where you can configure things further.
Got it. So it's not like a storage class.
Yeah, unfortunately not.
Okay. Yeah. And I think just to the point of the diverse API stuff, like I think there are certain things that are common, like specifying is the backend IPv6, IPv4, or both. But there's also, the details of how that gets implemented are different, and there might even be different exposed settings for those details. So I think there is commonality, but then you start splitting the API in like, oh, you set this thing in this field, but this other thing you do in an annotation. And yeah, without doing full-fledged types, it's difficult.
I put it in chat, but it almost feels like, do we need like in the same vein as like the CNI and CSI and whatnot? Do we need a CLBI? Do we need some sort of like interface that can talk about how load balancers work in these situations?
Yeah, this definitely starts to sound like a cross SIG effort. I see the nodding. It's like, yep.
Yeah, this is actually like a really good question. That what like the tags I think would be like a great place to take this question to. Is that what they are? Technical
I mean,
action
we
groups, whatever.
could definitely ask the technical advisory groups, or if somebody really wants to dig into load balancers a lot for the next year, you could certainly try to spin up a working group. It's like working group load balancer. I mean, that could be some place that we could make a lot of progress. It's just a question of is that what we want to put a bunch of time into? Because it will definitely be a non-zero amount of time.
Yeah, totally. This is probably a good discussion topic for folks who be at KubeCon. This is probably one of those things too. We could like just see, kind of get a sampling of what people's thoughts are about it.
That could be a great for the community lunch stuff. It's just kind of a topic table.
Yeah, good call.
What do folks think of this? And get, kind of hold the electorate to the temperature of the room. Oh. Okay. Is there more we would like to discuss? Julian, that was a great annotations topic.
Yeah, thanks for all the input.
Okay, awesome. All right, I think we're going to jump over and take a quick look at open issues. Almigo, you want to take us through that?
Yeah, so I think the two that we have that still need triage are in the right place, actually. The batch update node status, we are still, this is still a discussion that's happening here. I think we're waiting to hear back from the original reporter to see if there's more information, but we are not accepting this as triage at the moment because there's nothing for us to do really. There's kind of a this is, well, not nothing for us to do, but this is still a debate whether, should we expose some methodology that, cloud providers could have a batch method for communicating with the underlying infrastructure. And it would require us to expand the cloud provider interface. So like, I don't think there's really much to add here. And, probably we should put a time limit on this where it's like, if we don't hear back in the next month or two, we could probably close this. I want to give this contributor as much time as possible to respond. Leo Lee.
Do you want to put a note on it and just say, we brought it up again at the SIG meeting today, and we would like to hear from you, before we close this. We'll discuss it again in our meeting in 2 weeks, something like that. So it's not a deadline. It's just like, we would like to hear from you. We will look into this again in 2 weeks. And then if we haven't heard anything in 2 weeks, then we'll be like, still haven't heard anything. But that gives them the opportunity if they want to weigh in.
That look okay?
That seems fair.
Okay. And then the other one here is a perennial favorite that I think is still, again, much talked about, the hybrid cloud support, which, I really appreciate that, that Sergey has put up, kept for that and everything. I'm still reading it, even though it's not that long, but like I'm kind of like trying to understand what we could do here. I don't think there's really anything to accept yet until we've decided that this is something that the SIG would actually take up. Like, are we going to make a plan to get into like, hybrid, kind of accepting this hybrid, cloud option? The original part of it, like the original part about introducing explicit node ownership, I think helps some other things. So like I could see this being okay the way, being okay as a general thing, but I would like to encourage everyone here to, take a look at this again. I know Joel's been putting in a ton of time here as well, but we're still waiting to hear back from Sergey as well. Oh, I guess Sergey updated it today, so cool.
Oh, great. And then I appreciate that Sergey's time zones make it difficult to attend. Joel, since you've read this and put a bunch of comments into it, do you want to give us the TLDR for people who may be checking this call out briefly as to what you think the next steps are?
Oh, good question. So if you don't know this, KEP, it's around, we want to have multiple CCMs running in the same cluster. At the moment, that's not possible because every CCM assumes that every node belongs to itself, and so it might start removing them when it doesn't recognize a provider ID. My last read of this was that I still think we need to understand a bit more about how we want to handle load balancing. Because at the moment, obviously, you create a service, type load balancer, one CCM is expecting to implement that. And cross cloud, not even cross cloud, maybe you've got vSphere and you want Metal. Like there's a lot of questions there about how we're going to handle the networking, how the load balancing will look. The KEP currently talks about just we don't support load balancing in these kinds of scenarios. I don't know if that's a good enough answer right now. Go ahead, Julian.
I haven't taken a deeper look into the cap, but just from what customers report for us, we have a lot of people who would like to have a cluster across multiple providers. They mostly just want to use public networking, and many have requested that we make the load balancer class configurable. So our CCM doesn't take the default load balancer class, but just takes a look at specific services that we should take a look at and only add our nodes there. So that is the expectations that I have seen from our customers around this topic.
Yeah, I think that kind of thing can make sense. But I think we should have something in the document explaining like you'll need to have load balancer classing. The CCM will need to understand how that works. You'll need to put your workloads in the right way with taints and tolerations, all of those kinds of things. I think we should kind of have this is the opinion of how this should be done so that we can kind of push this forward. I don't know if Mike, you have a differing opinion on that, but that was kind of my last view.
Yeah, I mean, I think like if we're good to push this forward, then I would almost say like we could just accept this and keep working the cap. Like I share your concerns. Like I want to see more talk about how how the networking's going to work, how like I think the approach that's taken so far is solving like a very specific problem, and it probably does solve that specific problem, but it's the wider questions, right? It's like, okay, when we're not talking about just that problem, we're talking about people using this all over the place. I want to see more about like those kind of things, but I need to read it again now and see what the latest changes have been added. So I mean, in general, like I love this idea. I think it's really cool. I just think when we start talking about how do we, like how do we make the container networking work and all this other stuff, it just starts to get really complex. And we haven't even gotten into the whole like virtual private clouds and all that other stuff. Like how, I don't know. Yeah, it's just a lot of stuff to consider.
Yeah, and I think all of the cloud providers have offerings where things bridge between cloud and on-prem. And so certainly I think there's mechanisms to do this. The question is how many of those are exposed and able to be used, you know, um, outside of the controlled environments, which is a question I don't have an answer to, but I suspect it will take a certain amount of effort for us to pull that together. It also sounds like 2026's theme is going to be load balancers, calling it right now.
Totally. 100%.
Oh gosh. All right. Anything more on these before we take a look at any more test grid or other stuff we want to take a look at?
Yeah, so that's the end of our needs triage. And I guess we'll continue to consider whether we want to take that, accept the triage. But yeah, let's look at our periodics to see how things are looking right now. I'm guessing they're looking okay because I haven't seen people blown up on Slack, but let's see, what is this one? Looks like just a singular failure here. Okay, looks like having some trouble with some stuff.
Looks like we had a timeout.
Yeah, this, that highlight is terrible. This could tangentially be related to CCMs if the regions for the storage stuff got messed up. But I'm guessing that this is just, it looks like, especially given that the failure was not, it looks like this is probably a flake. It probably just failed to connect the NFS that one time. Is this the same thing? Something different. Yeah, like I'm not too concerned about these. This looks like probably just a flake that happened with the NFS driver there.
Okay.
And I get, for people playing along at home, like, what we're looking at here is that this is a failure in the in-tree volume driver test for NFS3, and then we can see that, it's timing out on connecting to that NFS volume. So presumably the test creates an NFS volume and then attaches to it, but it probably just failed this one time and then worked the next time, I guess. So yeah, I think we're looking pretty good there.
Okay, great. I think that's the end of our agenda, unless we have any sub-projects. I know that I don't think we have anyone from sub-projects who wants to update us on anything today. So do we have any other topics before we close it out? All right. Then we will talk to you all in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks, Bridget.
Thank
I
you.
guess before we go real quickly, I'm gonna start to get a Google Doc together for the panel, and prime it with a couple just like questions that I've been thinking about, and I'll share it with you and Joel and Jesse and Walter and whatnot. So just FYI.
All right. Great. Thanks. All right. I think we can probably close it out then.
Cool. Thanks. See y'all
Thanks,
next time.
folks. See ya.